Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have a crowd from all over the world, so wherever you are, welcome to our next CTO Roundtable session on scalability on demand. And good to see so many of you again. Can I get a wave or a hi or something in the chat window to see if someone is there? Okay, yes, thank you. So we're not alone. That's always good to see. So we saw many businesses affected heavily, of course, by the COVID-19 situation. Many businesses are affected in a negative way, but all several are seeing very sudden growth. And if this crisis is making one thing clear, that you cannot predict workloads, and that sometimes you'll have to cope with extreme changes quickly. Workloads do not just relate to technology, and welcome back, Jan, of course, but workloads also relate to people. So suddenly you need significant more or less people. But also you might think as a CTO, are my procedures up to date? Is this significant change in workload not influencing my ability to deliver with the right security, etc.? A lot to keep an eye on as a CTO, and therefore a lot to discuss today, I would say. So let's start. I'm Gerbert Oude Velthuis, and I don't ask you to repeat that. So I'm the CTO of Travelia and General Manager of the software house in the Netherlands. And I will be your host today. And I'm really honored that I'm accompanied by Jan Chewy. Jan is a principal consultant at the Burning Monk and also a AWS serverless hero and the host of a very popular serverless podcast. But Jan, who can better introduce yourself than yourself? So if you can provide a short introduction, please.
Yeah, sure. So I am, spending half my time working as a developer advocate there. I also spend the other half of my time working as an independent consultant, where I work with lots of different companies around the world on basically how to go faster with less by doing serverless.
Yeah, very good, very good. So in Sami Pippuri, I hope that I pronounced that somewhat correctly. And Sami is the CTO and head of product at MaaS Solutions. Sami, can you explain what MaaS Solutions does and provide a short background about yourself?
Sure. So MaaS Solutions is so I'm kind of like down here. So MaaS Solutions is basically a consulting company as well. So I'm providing CTO as a service and head of product as a service, specializing in scaling product teams and technology. But perhaps I'm more well known from my latest project, which was at MaaS Global, where I built the team as well as the product known as WIM. And in that, scaled the team from 0 to around 80 people in several countries, sometimes going up, sometimes down. And yeah, I'm also a fan of serverless, which is also what WIM is being built around. So
okay, very good, thank you. And last but not least, Marek, Gajda. Marek is the CTO of the software house. And Marek, can you explain what your role is at the software house and how that relates to today's topic?
Yeah, sure. I'm Marek. We are the software house creating web and mobile applications, and we are providing outsourcing of the agile teams and building projects from scratch, working with startups. So we have this kind of service company that provides variety of IT services, and we have lots of customers asking us about the scalability and resilience. They are on the different levels of development, and but the issue of the scalability usually comes up very often, and it's understood with many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perhaps good to start off with by ensuring we all speak about the same. So scalability, resilience, people, it's all very much related. How do you define scalability, Sami? Let's start with you.
So, obviously, there's the kind of the technical element for scalability, just making sure that your infrastructure and your code can scale in terms of being able to serve customers. But there's a couple of other elements to this. So the other scalability element is how do you scale your team? How do you scale the actual output to be able to do more or do less according to what is required and when? And I think that is for a CTO it is sometimes maybe like is to do with the human element and matching that with the technology. And well, to me that's the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
In this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, indeed. So we have some issues sometimes with technology. I see that Jan's video went away. Jan, are you still there? And if you're still there, you might want to say what's your definition of scalability. And I'm going to give Jan a minute to return. So Marek, can I ask you?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. As I said, we have a variety of different customers, and I am surprised that the understanding of the scalability is such wide thing, which is very good. But I was trying to come up with one definition of that, and that would be more like a business definition that says that the technology, the solution, the technical solution should grow with the business. And this is the scalability, is that if the business grows, the technologies should grow with the business, and it should be all aligned. So if we have a big business, we should have big technology, small business, small technology, and it should be aligned. And that includes like people, the performance and everything that is inside.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. I get a message that Jan has lost his internet connection. Jan, are you back?
Back now. I should miss the question.
Yeah. Yes. Of course. That's not a problem. I will repeat that. So we're talking about scalability and resilience, people, all related to each other. So how would you define scalability from your point of view?
Well, I mean, scalability, is basically, well, let's see, how would I define that? So how do you, I guess, so as your application or as your organization grows or your business grows, how do you keep things running the way and performing at the same level as you have done previously? So, if you have 100 users today, can you still do the job as well as when you have
Oh, this is very unfortunate.
that's of. Oops, looks like I lost connection again.
Yeah, no, you're back
I think
again.
one example that unfortunately this is probably going to keep happening today.
Okay.
So yeah, one example I think of a business function that often gets overlooked when it comes to thinking about scalability is customer support. I mean, we used to build games that's got millions and millions of daily active users, and you quickly find that even if 0.1% of your customers experience a problem per day, that's fine when you've got 10,000 users. But once you scale to 2 million daily active users, then, well, guess what? You can't handle the volume of questions people have coming through to your customer support team. So you need to scale that side of your business as well. Yeah.
No, indeed, and that's why we also said people, process, and technology, but very much people related. Yep. For everyone, please note that we would like you to ask as many questions as you want. You should make use of this very experienced panel and ask questions, and we'll try to answer all of them if that's possible, but if we can't answer all of them, then we'll get back to you after the call and try to answer them after the call if that's possible. If you do that, please do that in the questions tab. We're monitoring that, and we'll take questions during and after the session, so just type them in when they come up, and we'll try to answer them. Okay, thank you. Good. So if a case, the names, a case of that describes what we're discussing here, I would say is we know all. We all heard about Zoom. They sort of overnight grew by 30x from 10 million daily participants to 300 million daily participants. That's huge. The systems kept working, where other systems had some downtime during first days of lockdown in many European countries. So having said that, a company that grows like Zoom also gets other interests. And this is a very friendly example, but there were not so friendly examples, I would say, and Zoom bombing became popular. So several authorities said, hey, you shouldn't use Zoom anymore. And obviously, the shareholder says, but I want the growth. This is an every CTO's nightmare, I would say. Success is finally there, and then you're not ready for it. That's wow, that's a real nightmare. So that's why we chose this topic, and we're going to discuss further about it. So improving, and this is a question I would like to start with Jan. Improving scalability and resilience would you say that's something that can be done by only focusing on infrastructure, or how do you see that, Jan?
Yeah, absolutely. Infrastructure is just part of the equation, as we talked about earlier already, that you have to scale the team, which is the people, then the business as a whole, which includes other sort of non-technical functions like customer support is quite a typical one as well. Yeah. And in terms of the resilience side of things,
yeah, and unfortunately, the connection is really not helping us here, Jan. So I'm asking the same question to you, Sami. If you could answer that.
Yeah, so obviously everybody kind of dreams about the situation in terms of the kind of push or the kind of inbound user base that Zoom got. That's a bit late for a CTO to start re-architecting things. So I think hats off for Zoom to be able to scale in the first place, and their service was relatively well up. So I mean, it's just that they became a bigger target than they had maybe architected themselves to be. So while they were able to support the volume, but they kind of struggled maybe with a couple of other things, how their other software was maybe scrutinized before. They had not had that kind of exposure. So that part was maybe the kind of the learning for them. But yeah, I can only imagine the kind of long days and nights that those guys have been doing lately for patching things up and rolling out new releases and routing traffic globally differently, and while maintaining the kind of the quality of service. And I think that is no small feat.
No, indeed, yeah. Marek, don't know if you heard the question. You were gone for a second, but anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree that usually the infrastructure is not solving the problems, meaning the whole itself. Some people think that if they would just go to AWS or Google Cloud or any kind of cloud service, they will have this magic switch that they can just pull and just pay more money, and it will just work faster, right? And but this is actually not the case. and the more you can extend it to some level, but usually this level is far too less for this big traffic to happen. You have to create a good architecture and be prepared for something more than just extending the power of the computing power and stuff like that.
Okay, so, and Sami, you were talking about, hey, if the CTO was thinking about re-architecting, etc., at the last minute, then you're too late. That's obvious, of course, and so re-architecting also is it's about how does the inner, how does the application work, not just the infrastructure and things like that. And then you have things like observability, etc. So do you have observability in your applications, and how do you work with that?
Well, I guess pretty much everybody who is in production should have ways to observe what's going on. And in a way, serverless, which is kind of what I've been using for the past 4+ years, makes things a little bit maybe trickier in the sense that you're not always exactly sure where your limits are, and until you hit them. So you get very little warning unless you have tried things out and instrumented things in a proper way. Of course, clouds typically provide a lot of different tooling for this. There's a lot of third-party tools for observability. And in Wim's case, we kind of ended up rolling our own for the most part, using different kind of, say, Amazon components, using CloudWatch a lot, as well as building some custom reporting dashboards with Grafana, and using notifications in places like Slack or in worst case SMS if something would happen. And as well as logging things into Elasticsearch for troubleshooting what happened, etc. So all these tools everybody have available, and everybody should be using those. Or then look at maybe alternatives, like Datadog or Hexagon, etc.
Yeah. So this is a topic that I'm sure Jan had a lot to add about. How do you do observability in a serverless environment? But we'll get back to that maybe later. Hope that he can connect again.
Hey, I'm here.
Oh, you're here! Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I'm back just in time.
We don't see you, but that's okay. We know we see a picture. So, hey Jan, observability and serverless, and Sami was saying that it makes it a little bit more difficult. What would be your approach? What do you see as a good approach to that observability for serverless setup?
Yeah, I think for observability and serverless, I don't think it's more difficult. It's just different. Some of the tooling is slightly different. Some of what we do is different. And also, I think the fact that we're building more complex architectures, potentially driven systems with serverless using Canadian.
That's very unfortunate. Jan, I don't know if you hear me, but we'll move on. We don't hear you anymore. So I've got a question from, and I hope I pronounced that correct, Ekaterina. And Sami, that's maybe an answer of a question that you would like to take. So how do you scale tech teams in a moment of hiring freeze like now? A lot of companies have a hiring freeze, and how do you then still get the support that you need?
Obviously, hiring freeze is it's one thing, and like I said, scaling goes both ways. So sometimes you scale up, sometimes you scale down, and you kind of have to take that into account with the different kinds. Already starting from how you architect things, where your sort of core is and where you might add scalability factors, and how do you then bring on board perhaps people who may not be your full-time employees, but say using subcontracting or outsourcing in those strategic areas. And for a CTO, that's really when you start to plan your team as well as your architecture, because usually people and the software components go hand in hand. Then you kind of have to think about these things. Like what do you keep in house with the core team, and where is your scalability factor?
Yeah. So there's also a Jago asks a related question. Do you consider scaling or prepping to scale a core activity? And in general, would you advise this is something that you should be handled by your own people, or get some outside expertise in? What's the downside, upside of both sides of that? How do you see that, Marek? Maybe you can first answer that question.
So maybe I will first answer this question from Katerina.
Okay, that's also good.
This is because we are experiencing that in the software house, that there are a couple of companies that, especially right now, that they say that they have this hiring freeze, and that's why they decided to go with the team augmentation with the vendor like us. And this is usually I see that this is more and more of an option for and we are, for example, I know how it happens, but we are handling the remote hiring. So there is always this option for the team augmentation. Some of them even say that they want just to hire this team for a particular moment in time. So they need, for example, a bigger team for 2 months, and they can never hire internally somebody for just 2 months. And this is also where the software houses came in. Because we are able also not only scale up, but also to scale down, which is also pretty important sometimes.
Yeah, and then maybe Sami, the question: would you consider scaling or prepping to scale the core activity? Is that something that you're constantly thinking of, or is that more ad hoc, or how do you see that?
Well, I would love to say that you constantly think about it, but in the end, oftentimes it becomes a little bit ad hoc. But I think when you have the luxury of starting something new, then I think it's worth a thought or two to spend a little bit of time when you start exactly this, that how do you architect things, and where you have like long lead times and long running services, and where you might benefit from, say, this kind of a 2-month projects and etc., building the peripherals. And so I think it's a core activity, and it should be. But unfortunately, in many cases, it tends to be a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction where you hit this kind of thing that, hey, now we landed some magical deal with the company, and now we need to hurry up and scale. And in a normal market, then you have problems, because hiring from competitive market it just does not happen just like that. So I'm actually being as a customer of the software house, I ended up in that situation as well. So so you guys were able to help me out in finding people.
Yeah,
happy to help you. Hey, Jan, I hope you're back. It's if you look at the people side, there are many factors to scalability, what we already discussed. And one thing that I always find really interesting is cases where external advice or additional support is needed, and then the current team, the existing team is like, it's my product, my baby, etc. I can imagine that you, as an AWS serverless hero, is pulled into a crisis and you will run into this. So how do you manage that? And now I hope that magically his mute button goes off. No, unfortunately. So I think Jan left the building. So Marek, maybe you are in the same situation often where you're extending existing teams, and the existing team is like, you know, this external group of developers. How do you manage that? How do you cope with it?
I think I even wrote an article on our blog about it.
Okay. Maybe I should read it.
Like how to prepare your local team for the team augmentation from the outsourced company. Yeah, there is usually this kind of hesitancy at the beginning, because yeah, the local team usually says that what are those guys? Are they going to fire us? What do they know about the system? So this is always gaining the trust. This is we have to be very careful about what we say first, because those guys or girls are working usually with this, so it's natural that their knowledge about that is way bigger than ours. And but it is both blessing and a curse for them, because they are so inside that they sometimes don't see that there are actually different solutions, and that's not their fault. That this is why the new blood should come in and show that some of the things might change, and this is usually a good thing. But we try to not do that from the very beginning, because if we would just say that on the day first, we'll say, yeah, we've done this audit and this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and we should change the whole architecture because this is just old and this is not the way how it works. Yeah, this is not the way to go, because they will just immediately be in this defense position. They will go into the defense mode, and just instead of trying to figure it out with us together, they will be just be preparing for this battle. No, our solution is good. We have created that for years now, and it's good. So it's we first have to go inside really slowly and see what's inside, gain the trust of the people, show them that we are actually worth something, that we are sharing the understanding of what the system really is about, and usually then after this time we can come up with some propositions about the scalability and the architecture that will be considered and will be figured out together with them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So, a question from the audience, Wouter. Wouter asks, and Sami, if you could answer that, how would you manage scaling infrastructure or software on a budget? So in additional explanation he provides is, we're planning to scale about 20x in terms of active users in the coming months, but we are on a limited budget, and I've learned a lot about infrastructure, but not an expert myself, and we have no in-house experts. Any things to share on that, Sami?
Well, sounds like you would benefit from hiring somebody as for a short time to make a review of your infrastructure, where the bottlenecks are and where your bulk of your costs are. So there's, if you're using Amazon, there's this, for example, this well-architected review, and there are companies who specialize on optimizing the cost of the infrastructure. So I think first of all, find out those kind of low-hanging fruits where you can actually save some money in your current architecture, which hopefully then gives you a little bit of more buffer in actually building up for that kind of a upscaling of the infrastructure. Maybe do some re-architecting of services that are expensive or unoptimized. And I would encourage you to take a look at this kind of on-demand compute model, such as using lambdas more and sort of the different kinds of provided services, using more traditional cloud components. You can always also optimize your costs with things like reserved instances, etc. You need a bit of buffer for that because typically those you kind of have to commit upfront to a cost. So I think the first step is to understand where your money goes and try to optimize it to be giving you a little bit of leeway.
Yeah. And I am not sure that people like Jan, but also the software house and others, they're able to help you there. And so maybe as Michal was monitoring these questions, if you could copy Wouter's question and send it to Jan, then he can answer, also provide his view on it in the chat window, which might help Wouter also. Okay.
Well, adding to that, if there's one very simple way that I don't know what application it is but usually you can achieve a lot by good caching. Like this is like an old style way of doing stuff, but it's still this caching mechanism can speed up a lot with not so much of a cost. This is there are also this which is not the advertisement, but I like the Cloudflare platform, which is like this proxy between your service and the internet, the CDN one, which already provides some kind of caching, and with some really low cost, you can actually gain a lot, but only in particular cases, of course, if you have a lot of static things. But you can do it very, very easily.
Good addition. Thank you. Sorry for not checking in, Marek. Related to this knowledge, what we were talking about, and bringing in external teams, etc. It's also the other side of it is that teams very often want to use the latest of the greatest. The how do you split hypes from real improvements there? Marek, do you have anything to say about that?
So
how do you split technical hypes from real improvements?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because we see a couple of technologies that were this kind of hype, and then actually people are now left with the code base that that is very hard to handle because there are no longer developers doing that, or they're extremely expensive. I will probably cause a war here if I say Ruby on Rails is one of them. Probably like immediately on the chat there will be like lots of people saying, no, Ruby is still alive. But there are this kind of hypes. Also, not sure about the Svelte right now. Have you, Sami, heard about the Svelte?
Yeah, I've heard of it and I've taken a look at it, but I think it still has a little bit of way to go to be, on the hype cycle properly.
Yeah, so it's been there for a couple of months, and I keep hearing it from different places that React no more, Svelte will be the new king. Maybe it will, but that's the question. When should we actually move to Svelte, right? There was this old Angular JS that we've been creating apps in this first version of Angular, and then suddenly the authors came and said, well, actually we should go with the Angular 2.0, which is completely not compatible with the old one, and we are still left with the with some of the we have internally wrote that to the new Angular, but we have still customers coming into us asking for help because they didn't have the budget to actually rewrite all of that, and they still have the old Angular, and they need to do something with it. So yeah, that's the very good question, how to actually distinguish that, and this almost looks sometimes like a stock exchange market, just looking at the technologies and if they are like popular or not so popular. I think that the popularity thing is more important than actually what this technology represents itself, because even if you have a very good the technology is very, very good, but it's still not used and there is no community over it. For me, it's still not a good way to go, because I need to hire people for that. I need to also have this kind of scalability, right? And on that, and as big as our company is, which is 160 people right now, we cannot just afford going into this kind of new tech so quickly, because this demand from me doing this kind of workshop exercises, I cannot train it to the customers, right? So I have to do it internally. So this is like a very very hard topic, and but if we decide to go with the new technology, which usually means I am just hearing to my people, and if more and more of them are keep saying that this is a good way to go, we are just doing this kind of test drive internal project and see how it goes, and then we are making these decisions. But I would say that we are rather taking these things slowly, than just going into the bleeding edge technologies as quick as possible. Sometimes they're kind of too long.
No. That's I don't want to stop you here, but Jan also has a good addition to it, where he says, in the chat window, I think you really need to try them out. What is it really like? Experiment with it, proof concepts, etc. But then he also says, think like hackathons and game days. It's what you were saying, we're trying it out with a small internal project.
Yeah,
it's similar as try it out and then look at how popular can I actually hire people that know this, or train them easily.
Yeah, I'm with Jan on this one as well, because I kind of I don't really have. I would like to say that I have a great method on figuring out which is cool and which is a fad, but ultimately it's about a little bit like a gut feeling that you get with experience when you look at exactly what's the ecosystem like, how fast has it been coming along, who's behind it, and so forth, and where it's being actually used and picked up. There you get certain kind of indicators, but then again, you kind of have to be able to, or be kind of willing to make that kind of investment to have folks try it out on their, on their side project, or try it out yourself even better, to get the actual feeling that is this going to be useful, and how much do I believe that this is going to take off. And ultimately, you have to be prepared to, get rid of your baby as well, and rewrite it with a different technology. That especially important in a product company where you're building up something that needs to be there in 5 years plus, etc. Then it would be terrible if you were well, I guess you could take a look at banks and the credit card transactions, which still go through COBOL mainframes, and those guys are in a bit of a mess with that. So yeah, re-architecting things is important, and trying out things, even though if you're a CFO or something, then you might get challenged that okay, why do you keep redoing the same stuff? But you have to do it because otherwise you will be falling behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I on top of that, and I was asking on one of the conference, one of the speakers, how to say that to the CFO that we need to constantly do that, and he said that he's usually comparing that to working out. That you cannot just like work out for 1 month and then you have like a muscles and that's all. You have to work out all the time.
Improve yourself constantly.
Yeah.
Okay, no, very good. And a next question is if we talk about scalability and cloud, and if people start looking at it, they're sometimes say, hey, I'm moving this on-premise system to the cloud, and I'm everything is rosy, and then they find out after a standard lift and shift that it's actually not. It's not bringing them the scalability that they were looking from a technical point of view there. To those people, what would be your advice, Marek?
I think that this observability is something that we have already mentioned, and this is we are doing a couple of we were doing audits of the systems, and usually there is like this lack of observability. So there are not like sufficient metrics, and we don't really see how what the whole application flow is, and this is the very important thing, to have a good logs and good metrics over the system. And I think this is even more important than actually having a scalable thing. Is to start with gaining the full control where you are with your software to make the right decisions. And this is something that usually is forgotten, because this is like a this is not on the feature list. This is so-called non-functional requirement, and it's also very background like. So if you write down any kind of tickets and features what should be inside, you usually don't have this observability there. So that would be my advice to check if you really have a control of that.
Very good. And Sami, anything to add to that from your side?
I'm happy to say maybe that I have been sort of steering away from moving stuff from on-prem to cloud. I would much rather start again if something needs to be just moved. So of course, things like containers, etc. They have helped this out a lot. However, so I think it's more like a band-aid. So if you move something to the cloud, then you might get like the infrastructure benefits, maybe some consolidation with new stuff that you have developed in the cloud. But to really take advantage of the cloud migration, then you kind of do want to, in my opinion, get rid of the legacy as quickly as possible. But Jan had also a point about this in the chat.
Yeah. No, it's indeed not making, with a simple lift and shift, you're not making use of all the other power and possibilities that the cloud provides you, which is way bigger effect, of course. Yeah, okay. Looking at the time a little bit, okay, we're doing well. So I had a really great question for Jan here, because he worked on an application that had 1.2 million concurrent users, and I would, do we have some war stories or something? But another question, Sami. If you think about deployment and scalability, did you have a situation where you set up the deployment processes such that you can easily scale technically, let's say, over the world, and secondly also release quickly with guarantees that you don't make mistakes and things like that, and create security issues because you went too fast and things like that? Do you have any experience with that and something to share about it?
Well, yeah, well, there's obviously the kind of the deployment pipeline is a very important way or important thing in the modern software development. Mm-hmm. At the time when, say, our last project, the Wim app got started, serverless was pretty new, so we kind of had to come up with our own ways how we manage the deployments as well as the build pipelines. I think this field has gotten a lot more mature now. But of course, things like CI/CD, they are a massive help, and once you pick the right tools, then that allows you that kind of a flexibility that if you need to do or want to do deployments globally, you can. It's basically a matter of using those tools in a different way, so you can pick and choose how you roll things out. And I did have one war story though.
Good. We like war stories.
in the chat here, but one example of lessons learned on scalability and serverless especially. We kind of DDoSed our database a few times because of sometimes lack of caching, but sometimes more like a design issue, but also lack of communication with our marketing. So say our marketing folks, we love them, but they had a wonderful campaign which was very good success, sending I think about 150,000 push messages to people, and seems like quite a lot of them actually found that interesting and clicked the same time on this push notification, which took them to a deep link into the application, into a view that hit our backend without any kind of caching, and exhausted. I think one time, well, a few times, I think we ran out of connections in RDS. That was before RDS proxy existed. A couple of times ran out of CPU and as well as quota from third-party services. So that's kind of the double-edged sword with Lambda, that it does not fall over in that kind of situation, but something else might, where you don't have the same kind of scalability factor baked in. Yeah. So yeah, that was interesting learning. But 1.2 million concurrent users, I think we're still a little bit off from that.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
That's a huge challenge on the scalability if you have these kind of peaks, because this is like a different story. If and we have a couple of customers like that they say, okay, because what I really want is that we from time to time have these kind of peaks. Like we had the one customer from Norway that had an app that was used on the soccer games, on the football matches. So they say that okay, so literally our traffic is like 0 or something, and then there is a football match. We go like that, and then we go back to the minimal level, right? So we don't want to pay the whole time this big infrastructure. We just want to like turn it off and on, right? and this was kind of a challenge to do this in this way. And well, we did it on Kubernetes. It was before the Lambdas. It was some time ago, but we it was supposed to work in the way that it's auto scaling. that it immediately finds out that the traffic is growing and the infrastructure is growing, but actually it was too slow. And we were in this good situation that we knew exactly when the traffic will be.
Yeah, you know when the game starts.
Yeah, so it could be like a manual on and off button.
Yeah. No, and related to that, it's a question that I have here is, what would be, Marek, what would be your advice to balance cost and scalability and also resilience in that matter?
Yeah, so also very good question. How to balance out of that? I would still answer that with first having control and knowing your flows and knowing your bottleneck is the most important thing, is to actually have control over that, and then you can play with the budget and everything. I'm not really I think that sometimes there's also this term that the premature optimization, so that the developers tend to start on optimizing things too soon. They after 2 sprints they already say, yeah, we need to refactor everything. And so you need to have like a good control over what is happening and what is actually needed to make these kind of decisions when we are optimizing and when it can still wait. It's also good to have this kind of critical paths defined. Usually it's good to have this exercise with a QA team that we agree on a couple of critical paths that are really critical for the business, and just imagine if the rest of the system is like not working at all, but we are having those critical paths still going on pretty good. If this would be like close enough in the critical situation,
yep.
right? And if we can agree on this kind of way, we can just focus on those critical elements that really need to work, and not focus on optimizing the profile settings window to work as fast as possible.
Okay. Yeah. So indeed, splitting out, focusing on what is critical for your business, and make that scalable first, and yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, Sami, anything to add to that?
Yeah.
Before we go to the questions.
So yeah, in this one, of course, like I said many times, the kind of even if you fine-tune the core of your business, great, but it might be dependent on some external service that may not be as resilient. So these kind of things you need to be isolating, and it's quite difficult to find those out with just testing, for example, because if you might have different kinds of rate limits in production and test, etc., and you don't want to, stress test your partner systems, or you might not be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But so these kind of things happen to everybody, even the best of them. So it's really important that you also have a very rigorous process on troubleshooting what actually happened, and learn from those. Really have a post-mortem and pick out what exactly happened, and how do we prevent this from ever happening again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because so actually this is a good question for you, Sami, because you are integrating with lots with lots and lots of these external services, right? So what are you doing if they fail on their side? Do you have like a plan B?
Well, we try to hedge our bets so that there would not be just a single provider whose failure will bring everything down. And that's typically in the case of, say, taxis, that still works because you might have several taxi companies offering services in a same location. So then you just silently ignore the one that failed and then continue your way. So try to be sort of error resilient, so that the one error that you get does not bring everything down and still provide some level of service to the end user. Sometimes you get errors from really like a core components, especially when you build on various SaaS services and then you hit, say, rate limit, or they have an issue in their end, and that's a little bit more difficult to recover from. But yeah, building this kind of a fault tolerance into things is how we deal with things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if we before we go to the questions, would like to take a minute to talk about the CTO Roundtable sessions. So we're organizing them once per month, and we're rotating the panel based on the topic. And so if you want to see specific topics or discuss specific items, let me know. And also, if you want to be on the panel, which is, I think, a great experience, and please let me know. Next time we have, we're skipping July, by the way. Next time will be 25th of August. And I see that you just got a pop-up where you can also already register, so that's great. I'm really happy with the fact that we have Daniel Gabler from Picnic. Picnic is the world's fastest growing online supermarket. Talking about his strategy and how he was ready for the growth that happened. Really extreme growth. Please note that this session is at 6 European. And of course, tell your friends, register now, and you will find the registration also over the normal channels. So let's move to the questions from the audience. And by the way, if you want to connect, here's my my details. A question from Robin. Interesting. So that's I don't know if we're specialists on that, but if you talk about scalability and the situation that we're in now, is how do you protect your files and documents whilst everyone is working remotely with a potential second lockdown coming up? That's always a question. We hope not, etc. But did you take any special measures because of people now all working remotely, Sami?
Actually, we didn't have to really, because we were a young company set up as a sort of a cloud-first company. So we did not have any servers at home. I think, well, lawyers have their own cabinets where they store contracts, etc. But everything else we kind of do digitally. So actually, working from home was not really that different. Obviously, for a startup environment, you kind of want to have this very dynamic environment where you exchange ideas and brainstorm around whiteboard. So that was a bit of a bummer that was quite a lot more difficult. So you missed the social aspect, but in terms of being able for people to do their job, we didn't really have to do anything on the IT side.
Yeah. No, okay. Anything you needed to change, or you would advise, Marek?
Yeah, we are also working remotely before. Well, we have an office, but we still got this deal with our employees that they can take some days as the remote.
Mm-hmm.
I guess right now. So we had it pretty much defined. So this didn't hurt us at all. Actually, it was even worse, because we started to hire people from different places. Firstly, we were just focusing on local talent market let's say. And now we have already hired a couple of people that are working fully remote. So that was actually pretty good for us. The question was about the documents as well.
Yeah, it was about files and documents. How do you secure that, etc.
So we had it all in the cloud. We have it pretty much digitalized, but still, like actually, the GDPR helped us because last year was this GDPR year that everybody had to prepare somehow to these new regulations. So actually, we already had like a defined way of protecting the documents online in the cloud, so it wasn't a problem. But I will also tell you one story I got from my friend in Volkswagen, because the board of the Volkswagen was very, very hesitant on the remote work, and they were not allowing it at all. In their company, and it was pretty old-fashioned, and everybody was complaining on that. And they said that there's absolutely no way that they will agree on going on a remote work. And during this COVID-19 situation, they just had to.
Yep.
And
like many companies, yeah.
Yeah, and now after these 2 months, they're actually saying, "Well, it's not so bad. You can stay."
Yeah.
And,
okay. Now we see that with other companies also, the more governmental companies also.
yeah,
So, and a question for you, Sami, is La Santa is asking, when there's really a need to outsource part of the project to an outsourcing company, what are the aspects that needs to be looked into about the company? Is there a checklist or something that you have or can share?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can share it, but yes, we did produce a pretty long checklist that we went through with a lot of companies, and so it's to do with, of course, you want to find a partner that you're comfortable working with, because basically these are people that become part of your team. It's not, I think, the kind of the age of defining something on paper and then shipping it somewhere for implementation, that's gone. So you have to integrate the remote team into yours. So I think your own recruitment checklist is already a good start, finding out kind of on a people by people base, but then of course the kind of the B2B relationship comes into play as well, like what's the corporate governance, what's the jurisdiction, inside EU, outside EU, how does the money flow, meeting up with the people. In the COVID times is a little bit tricky, but most of it you can do remotely as well. We made a case that we do want to visit the location and actually see the people and so forth. But I think that was a good thing. Take it as a kind of a hiring process, basically.
Yeah, good advice. And indeed, we also like to see the people coming, absolutely visit the office. So because of time, there are more questions, but we'll get to you separately from the call. And I would like to thank you again, Sami and Jan. I hope you were able to follow a little bit. And Marek, of course, as we cannot physically give you a gift, if Google did its thing, then a few minutes ago, something dropped in your inbox, and I hope you will enjoy it. Thanks again. So with this, we end the CTO Roundtable session, and hope to see you next time. And don't forget to register. Thank you.
Thank you.